Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Chills at Will podcast. This is the first in that this is the second member of the Croatto family. This is Dave Croatto, and not too much of a bio to share off the top because we'll get through it as we go. Dave, it's been awesome talking to you before the show and officially welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. And I always
Love me
wonder,
to be the second Croatto on
uh,
here.
well, I mean, you're the first in our hearts.
Oh, I'm
But
sure.
like I said, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. I try to talk to people of all different types of writing, and your forte being humor writing. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, likewise.
Growing up with Pete, and I guess other people in your family,
I knew
whatever.
other people. Yeah.
I'm wondering what you were reading as a kid, whether it was stuff that you were assigned in school or stuff on your own. What was of interest to you growing up?
I loved comic strips. That was like some of the first stuff
Hmm.
I read. So like a lot of Garfield and
Classic.
Andy Circus, and then Calvin and Hobbes, and that was like grade school. And then I found Dave Barry in high school.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I was a nerdy student, and I always did the reading. So pretty much anything that was assigned,
Hmm.
I read. But in terms of stuff that I read myself, comic strips and comic books like Batman, that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, that was where my interest laid for the most part, and like some fiction and stuff like that. But yeah, when I was like grade school, that was big stack of Garfield books.
Oh yeah.
Every Scholastic School Fair was good for one or
Oh
two.
man. Those people of a certain generation, right? We remember the Scholastic book fairs and the Scholastic manuals or magazines every month or 2 months. Those are great times, right?
Yeah, well,
Hmm.
especially in a time before like big box bookstores. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't grow up with like a huge Barnes and Noble. That
Right.
was like a massive kids section that was like there for you, geared towards you. It was a big deal.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I've read just a little bit of Dave Barry. Like, was that something that was like over your head in high school? I kind of have the impression that he's like more like writing for adults, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it's very accessible. It's pretty
Okay.
silly. I mean, he was like syndicated in a ton of newspapers, so it
Hmm.
wasn't like I don't know, it wasn't stodgy or like
Hmm.
it's observational humor and stuff
Sure.
like that. So
Yeah.
uh, I've not gone back to it in a lot of years, so I'm having trouble remembering like specifics. But I just remember finding that like in the library and just breezing through it, and then getting my hands on as many as I could.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was his thing.
I wonder if you're part of the Calvin and Hobbes, reading Calvin and Hobbes to putting the Calvin and Hobbes decal on your truck pipeline.
Yes, well, I need to let everyone know that I don't care for Chevy, and that
Okay. Okay.
it must be pissed on.
Right. Yeah, that was always an interesting one to me. Like, who was the first one who had that? You know what I mean?
I don't know, man. It's amazing that, because I mean, it's obvious it's not licensed, right? It's like,
Hmm.
and it's not even like the image of Calvin is like he's not pissing in the comic. It's like him filling a
Right.
water balloon, and someone added the string. So it's a pretty. I don't know, it's like there's a documentary to be made about like how that came to
Oh
be.
shoot, you're gonna make that. Good luck to
Oh
you.
yeah,
Let me know when that
right
comes out.
into it.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
that's where the money is.
I always remember like a Simpsons episode. It was Homer's going to a rock concert. He finds this jacket he hasn't worn in like 20 years. It was like his rock concert jacket. He pulls out a beer. It's a Billy beer,
Yeah.
right? Which was, I guess, what Jimmy Carter's brother, I guess,
Yep.
had this short lived. And I was probably 12 or 13 at the time, and I kind of laughed because, haha, he had a beer in his jacket he hadn't, 20 years. My dad is cracking up because he got the joke.
Right.
You know what I mean? He understood the reference. I
Yeah.
wonder how much like you might look back on Calvin and Hobbes and what was the other one you mentioned? Garfield or any of those, and kind of
Yeah.
like look back now and can be kind of like, oh shoot,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
It's interesting because like my kids are now into Garfield. I've got an
Hmm.
8-year-old son and an almost 6-year-old girl, and so we're rereading them and like re going through them. And it's funny, like Calvin and Hobbes, I kind of never stopped reading. I'd always kind of
Sure.
check in and help. but the Garfield especially, it's like, oh man, I totally didn't get that, or like that was
Mm.
a word that I didn't understand, or
Mm-hmm.
because especially now reading it, like my son will be like, what does like negotiation mean, or like what are because there's just like a random
Sure.
punchline that was like, um, but yeah, but I think that's any good humor or any good anything for a kid is like there's going to be some stuff that's over their head, and that's what makes it kind of like makes them keep reading. It makes it sort of
Sure.
aspirational.
Yeah.
um Mad was certainly was like that and tried to be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to read through it again.
Yeah. I bet. So we're gonna talk a little bit about. We're gonna talk a lot about the difference between writing and like a movie, a comedy, a movie versus writing, etc.
Mhm.
Um, I wonder what were some of like were you into like stand up and like comedy movies a lot
Yeah,
because there's a very strict, a very specific, I believe, format, and you know better than I do about writing comedy. Did
yeah.
were you like watching stand up and like taking notes like, oh man, George Carlin, the way he brought that story around, or that kind of stuff.
No, I mean, I was so young. I mean, like, I guess I remember watching stand up in when I was like fourth grade, fifth
Hmm.
grade, stuff like that. I mean, Robin Williams was huge. Eddie Murphy was huge. You'd see like Comic Relief, and
Right.
that was like a lot of stand up. And it wasn't something even at that point where like, oh, I'm going to do this. It was just something I really enjoyed. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, I knew I liked stuff, and you're that age, you just absorb the stuff you like and you mimic
Sure.
the stuff you like. Um, now that I'm older, and I can look at it and kind of be like, oh, that's wow, it really has command of that. But as a kid, you're just you're excited to watch the fireworks. You don't really think about how any of it's happening, or what
Sure.
the science is behind it.
That makes sense. Who I wonder who you were reading. It doesn't necessarily have to be humor. Who were you reading as you got into high school and college? Who were some of those readers? What kind of texts were interesting you?
What was I reading? Jeez. I mean, again, like a lot of what was assigned, and then like sort of filling in gaps of, like I remember reading like The Grapes of Wrath one summer
Mm-hmm.
because I hadn't read it, and like, okay, I'd read some Steinbeck. Um, but I don't know, I was an English major like Pete. We were in this
Okay.
literally the same program. So it was a lot of reading assigned and reading that. And then like for my own amusement, like a lot of comedy stuff. Like by high school and college, it was like, oh, Ben Stiller and Jeanine Garofalo wrote a book. I definitely
Mm-hmm.
want to read that. Jon Stewart has a book. This is before he's even hosting the Daily Show. Has a
Yeah.
book of like comedic essays, like definitely. So that was the stuff that was like always, like I sought out to read. I don't know if I didn't really have like there was no writer at that age where I was like, oh, cool, I need to
Mm-hmm.
read like the new Richard Russo or the
Mm-hmm.
new, um, but there was definitely stuff in that I was assigned to read that I loved and sought out, or,
Right.
like Catcher in the Rye. I had read, like I'd already read twice by the time I was out of high school. I mean, not
Mm-hmm.
that supposed to be a brag or anything, but it's just like I really loved that book, and it got assigned twice, and it's one of those books that I kind of keep going back to. But yeah, I mean, I always had a lot of reading kind of to do just for school, so I wound up reading a lot of stuff, and stuff I didn't like and stuff I did like. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any like common. I'm looking at my bookshelves right now to see if anything is like, oh yes, that I purchased in 2001.
Right. Well, there was
But
this book. It came out. It kind of recently. It's called something about prime time, hang time, Pete Croatto or something. I don't know if you
I'm
heard of it.
waiting on a comp copy of that.
Oh
You
shoot.
spend money on it. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah. Don't waste your money.
yeah. I don't want to. I don't want to enable big publishing anymore.
No, quite a heck of a book written by your brother about the history of NBA, kind of from the 70s and on. But
Yeah, you've
um,
already talked to Pete. Let's keep this on
yeah,
me as the.
exactly. I know, right? Um, I wonder again. I don't want to like impose these things on you when you were like 5 years old. None of us were like looking at the world with that, the analysis at age 5 and saying, oh, that's metaphysical and blah blah blah. But were you able to? Do you feel like you remember seeing the difference between like mean spirited humor, just to like what do they call it, like punching down type of
Right, right, right.
versus like, oh, that's like some smart humor. I wonder if you remember kind of seeing the difference, and then, or if you can talk about some people who you think really do that well.
I think at an early age, like, I mean, like some kids, like a lot of kids, I think, like I realized what kind of jokes got me in trouble and what kind of
Mm,
jokes made me feel bad when I made them or
sure.
when I had them made to me. So I think I pretty early on, like hopefully at least, like tried to have people tried to be laughing with, not laughing at. So
Mm-hmm.
that was even before I was writing per se. Like, you know, if there was a year that I was clowny in school, you know, I was never like a real make fun of other kids type of kid, you know. Uh, so I I mean, I know like as a very young kid, like I liked Bugs Bunny more than I liked Daffy Duck because like,
Ah.
you know, Bugs Bunny was usually like pushed to a point where he had to retaliate, whereas like Daffy Duck was just this chaotic asshole who like
Sure, sure.
was just gonna ruin someone's life because you know. So I don't know if that's the same, but yeah, I mean, even now, I try not to like. I just don't think it's as funny, especially if it's someone who. I mean, if someone's a target and someone deserves to be made fun of, then like
Sure.
absolutely. But even like with Trump or like someone terrible, it gets boring and it
Mm.
gets effective when it's like, ah, look at his hair, look at his like weird skin. It's like, yeah, but there's so much worse stuff to talk about with that guy,
Right.
you
Right.
know. So it feels like very low hanging fruit. So it's even like,
Sure.
and it's where it goes always, and it's easy because like when Giuliani is like, you know, in court and his hair is melting down his face, it's like, yeah, that's fucking absurd and should be made fun of. But it's also just like the easiest and least terrible thing about him to make fun
Right. Right. No, that's a great point. Exactly. Like, oh, Trump's skin, great. Yeah, but how about the fact that he, literally did nothing while hundreds of thousands of people like died? Like, I see what you mean. It's just like,
Yeah, I mean, if that were like the go-to, if that's how history remembered him as like, oh, he was like a fatso with fake skin and
uh-huh.
terrible hair, that would be, man, he would be lucky to be remembered that way.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not the first one to say this, but like satire is dead, right? Like it's dead.
How do you mean?
I mean, after what's happened the last 5, 6 years, and total landscaping with Giuliani, and like you said, his hair's running down. Like satire or irony, I think is kind of dead. So maybe it
Man,
resurrects.
yeah, I will say, I guess. I mean, it would be nice if like reality became less horrible, you know, like
That's what I mean.
yeah, that would be like a good swing for all of us, I think, if it went back.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, how did you know you were good? How did you know, like, man, people are laughing with me, not at me? People are laughing with me, not at the target of my joke. Like, whether it was verbal or whether it was written, how did you know, like, I'm pretty good at this humor thing?
I mean, you feel, I mean, like you're a teacher, so you know how it is, like when you feel like, okay, the class is with me on this, they get
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm still chasing the high of like of like senior year of high school, like in a class where like the teacher is nice and the the class is a good group of kids, and it's just like you get into this rhythm and you get like, you know, it's a high, man. And I'm
Mm.
not like a performer by nature, but like you know, I mean, you know, like
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you're killing in eighth period. Um, but I mean, I remember, you know, I remember being in like second grade and like it's a lot of having like a nice teacher who was like, oh, that's funny, and that's, you know, and
Yeah.
I tended not to be like a disruptive kind of joker,
Hmm.
but you know, you'd get teachers that were like, you're really funny, I think I'm going to see you on TV someday. And when you're
Nice.
like 8 years old, it's like, I guess I'm destined for something bigger than this.
That means the world, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you know, it's a big bit of encouragement at a young
Yeah.
age. So I mean, there's a difference between that and then there's a difference between like making, like when I interned at Mad when I was a freshman in college,
Mm.
and then started making sales, and that very much felt like, all right, well, I'm not just like a hobbyist, I'm not
Mm.
just like a funny guy, I'm like I'm getting paid to do this, so I guess there's like there's there's something of a stamp of approval on that,
Yeah.
certainly. Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you dropping in second grade? Like the whole like I just flew in from California and boy are my arms tired. Like what
It
like
was it was all yeah, it was all Catskills. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't even remember. I mean, and it's so you can be. My son is in second grade now, and it's like I'm seeing it all. Where it's just like
Yeah,
kids are giggly at that age.
right.
You can be silly, and it's just it's just like you're just having fun. But I think there's sort of a I don't remember like my
Sure,
greatest hit
sure.
from Mrs. Naw's second grade
I
class.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know
but
what
it
you
was
mean. Wordplay and
fun,
puns, right? I mean, that kind of all in
yeah.
situational humor.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. The teacher would say something, and you'd raise your hand and be like, "I was just thinking, what if?" And then whatever, it's 30 seconds. It broke things up for a bit.
there you go.
Yeah,
So to connect the dots, you said freshman year you were interning at Mad Magazine.
yeah,
Like, how did you get into? I mean, Mad Magazine seems like it was the bulk of your freelance career. You said about 15 years.
yeah.
Um, I
I
mean, how
mean,
does that go? I mean, is that like the old fashioned, just like you're pitching articles, you're
yeah.
working in an office at one time? Like, how did that work with Mad Magazine?
Well, I was so it started with an internship, and that was like me in the office, and it's a small staff. Like, there's a lot of contributors, a lot of artists, a
Hmm.
lot of writers, but the staff that's in the office is only about like a dozen people. There's editors, and then there's an art department that like does layouts, does design, does works with the artists.
Hmm.
So I interned there, and then I made some sales, and then after college I continued to sell to them, like send them ideas, they'd say yes or no. And then after college I got hired as an editor, so I was
Oh, okay.
part of that staff and in the office for 15 years with that group. Um,
When it comes to editing, I know, I mean, that can be fraught anyway if you're an editor for people, like, especially if you're writing something personal, the person might almost like my feelings are hurt. Like, what is it like to edit someone's like, hey, that's my joke. Like, did you feel like people would get emotionally invested in it, or it's like, hey, this is business, I get it.
it depends, and it depends on the level of rewriting. Like sometimes, I mean, the guys who'd done it a lot weren't precious about it so
Okay.
much, but at the same time, you don't want to send in an idea with 10 lines, and then you see it in print and two of them are yours. And
Hmm.
I think we always tried not to do that. We would go back to them and be like, oh, we've got whatever, like we need 10 jokes on Trump. It'd be good to have one about like blah blah blah,
Hmm.
about, and then kind of give them the area and let them do that instead of, because then it's just like, well, we're taking it away from you, sort of. We want to, and it's not that we always had like, okay, here's the perfect line,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's like anything. You want to. I think it'd be like any kind of editing. Like, you want to make their writing better and push them in the right direction, but in a way that they're comfortable with and feel ownership of, and don't feel like they're being excluded from the creative process.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, we'd probably be going over rehashing old material as far as, I mean, it's obvious to say that the magazine industry has been going downhill, or, being downsized, et cetera, et cetera. But like, what was Mad Magazine? What is Mad Magazine's like, irreverent humor? I mean, how would you describe the mission or the philosophy of Mad Magazine?
I always thought of it as like our job was to be like the the fun uncle, right? So like
Uh,
that we could sit at the table and talk to the grown-ups, but that the kid at the table would feel included and might not get everything that was being said, but that we were making an effort to include that kid and have a conversation with them as well.
hmm.
So I think the overarching purpose of Mad was to like point out absurdity and dishonesty, and to be like a lot of kids' introduction to the idea that like, oh, like adults don't know what they're doing, or
Hmm.
they're lying to you about this, or this thing is not really so great, and just that everything is kind of has something mockable about it.
Is there a real Alfred E. Newman, or was there a
Uh,
real Alfred E. Newman?
like, is there someone that looks like that, or is there?
Was he modeled on like somebody specifically?
So that it was a character that had kind of been floating around in the, like, I don't want to say in the advertising world, but it
Hmm.
like dates back to, like, I think a painless dentistry ad from like
Okay.
1902. It's almost sort of like, the Kilroy was here, like the guy with like the nose and the hands, where it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I've seen that. I don't know who's responsible for
Yeah.
doing
Right.
it,
Right.
but it was on a much, much like lesser known scale. Just this kind of face, like this gap tooth, smiling, sort of like
Uh-huh.
weird, creepy, impish kid.
Uh-huh.
And one of the first editor, Harvey Kurtzman, picked up on it and kind of like started putting him in like in backgrounds and in like little as a little Easter egg.
Mhm.
And then at some point it was decided like, oh, this is a guy we should use as our mascot. So there's not like an actual Alfred E. Newman, and there's no like real human equivalent, thank God.
Mhm.
But yeah.
I wonder how much of writing for the Mad was like, satire in the true sense, where it's like, we want to point out foibles, like you said, of society, and hopefully society will change, or is it more kind of like, that's pretty funny, let's joke, let's laugh about that, or somewhere in between maybe.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not like everything was like a noble mission or anything. There's plenty of silly for silly's sake, and like,
Uh,
gross out humor, and you know I think that's part, I think, of being like the fun uncle, is that it's not all like explaining about how, like, well, this is how the world. Sometimes you just like, you're
yeah,
doing this, like,
yeah,
pass the
yeah, yeah.
time or make a kid laugh. So yeah,
uh,
it was the spectrum of
sure. did,
goofiness.
did you have some occasions where you're like objectively speaking, this is funny, where people maybe didn't get it, and you're like, this could have been for Matt or any of the other writing you did. We're like, trust me, this is funny. Like, I'm sticking to my guns on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what was good about. There's definitely everything that came into Mad, like every idea and every joke got voted by the staff, the editorial staff of like,
Okay.
the five of us. And there were definitely times where like, where you thought something was great and everyone else, when you'd vote it, you'd either give it a check for like thumbs up, an X for no, or a zero for like, I don't mind.
Okay.
And there were definitely times where like, I think every single person on staff, had checked it and everyone else had X'd it. And sometimes they made a case and sometimes they won.
Yeah.
I remember like a one panel cartoon that like no one went for. And I was like, I don't think you guys got this. This is great. And and they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of fist fighting about it, but it was also like, if I thought it was great and four other guys got it and were
Yeah.
like, it was not good, then it's not happening, unless
Sure.
I really, really, and there's only so many hills you can die on,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah. Yeah.
400 jokes in an issue. So
That makes
yeah,
sense.
some you win and some things like I railed against and lost, and that's just, how it
Sure.
is.
I wonder about your experience writing for the vaunted, the absolutely hilarious Onion.
Mm,
What
yeah.
what kind of work did you do there? Like, I guess it was freelance as well. How
Yeah.
did that work?
So that was, I think it still works this way. It's been a while since I submitted to them, but it used to be that like they had a group of writers who submitted headlines. So as every Monday or Tuesday, you submitted like, I want to say 25 headlines,
Mm.
which were just like, the headlines for the story. And then they would pick the ones they wanted from that and move forward. So that was my experience with them. I sold maybe a dozen over the
Hmm.
whatever, however long period it was that I did it.
Hmm.
Um, so that was my experience. Yeah, you would set the headlines and then they would write it. And then some people, that was mostly written in house though. They had their
Okay.
staff, you know, whatever, like 10 editor writers
Hmm.
who would then take the headlines they write and then that they liked and then write the actual articles from it.
Yeah.
Or in some case, I mean, a couple I sold, like they would do stuff above the fold, like above the headline, even that were just basically just headlines, where there was no story to it. There was just the headline and maybe a picture. So I sold a
Mhm.
couple of those also. But to to get to the point where you could like be trusted to write an article, I didn't submit long enough to figure it out. I love the Onion, and I'm proud to have
Yeah.
contributed anything, but I didn't want to be doing that for 3 years for the chance to. I mean,
Huh.
it's draining. Also, it's like 25. It doesn't sound like a lot, but like every week, to send in 25, it's like it's taking up a fair amount of your brain space and your to think in that voice and to you're basically all week like you're looking at stuff with that
Right.
through that prism of like, oh, that could be that, okay, that's a headline, or that's um so yeah,
So you're
it's a
saying, I'm
mhm.
sorry. I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, I got nothing else.
So you're saying that each person was asked to do 25 headlines. Oh,
Yeah,
shoot.
yeah.
I thought you were saying that you were one of 25 in the pool. Wow.
No, no, no. Well, I mean, so much of their stuff is evergreen also, so it's not,
Uh,
some stuff is topical, but I think if they had something they really wanted to do that was about like what happened that week,
sure.
they could come up with that themselves. So
Hmm.
yeah, they could get, and there's just so much content in every issue of the Onion also that
Hmm.
there's a lot to fill in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those people watching on YouTube, you can see this is from 2008. This is Dave's headline with that beautiful picture of Al Gore in a spacesuit with a baby
Yeah.
opening up a spaceship of some sort. The little caption, which I believe you did not write, correct, says, "Young Gore sets out for his new home where the sky is clear, the water is clean, and there are no Republicans."
It,
Tell me what the headline says and what went, how you came up with it.
Al Gore places infant son in rocket to escape dying planet. Uh, I get, it was probably when, geez, I mean, I can't believe it's been that long also, but it was probably when like An Inconvenient Truth came out, and he was
Sure.
doing a lot of talking about how bad things are, and it's a riff on Superman. I just realized that like, oh, that's basically like the situation that Superman's parents were in.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and the rest is history.
In the article, which I know you didn't write, but it has the, I don't know how you pronounce it, Kal-El or Kal-El,
Yeah, yeah.
which I know is, like you said, the Superman reference. Like, did you recommend that Superman slant to it, or that was something they came up with in house?
No, I mean, I think that's the slant of the headline. I mean, that's no one
Okay,
else putting their kid in a rocket ship to escape a dying planet, except for that's Superman's origin story. So I
sure,
think if they didn't get that, they wouldn't have gone for the headline. So
sure.
yeah, I think that I'd like to think that's built into the headline. Yeah.
The Simpsons were always making fun of Al Gore. Like, I think one of them bought like Al Gore doll, and it literally said, "You are hearing me talk."
Right.
You know, um, and I remember when Inconvenient Truth came out, I was like, okay, a documentary by Al Gore about what they probably called global warming at the time. Al Gore is great. Documentaries can be great. Climate change is something that really needs to be worked on. But I was like, this is going to be the most boring thing to ever be. And
Yeah.
I think it won an Academy Award or something, right?
Yeah, I believe. Oh, yeah.
And definitely very popular. So wow.
Yeah.
Um, The Onion had some great stuff on. I don't know how much of a sports fan you are on Tim Duncan. Did you ever read any of the articles they had on Tim Duncan?
No, I don't know that I did.
Just same kind of thing where he was known as just a really kind of a boring guy, great
Okay.
guy, but just there's some great stuff. And the Onion just consistently was absolutely hilarious and is
Yeah. I
consistently.
mean, yeah. Still, I'm trying. Yeah. I feel like just last week, some Onion. I never go to the Onion anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
like it pops up on my feed every once in a while, and it's. I mean, they're just so good at what they do, and
Exactly.
haven't. And it's another case where like the like a satire being dead. It's like how often do you see like, oh, this is not an Onion headline. This is really
Yes,
something.
not the Onion. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but there's still. I'm trying to think what it was. It was just like last a couple days ago, like something popped up on my Twitter feed that was spot on about like, gun violence or something. Yeah,
No
they're
doubt.
very good.
So we're about a week away, and then Cinco de Mayo. They might have done it for St. Patrick's. I know they run back a lot of them, and one of the ones that made me absolutely laugh so much was about like they gave whatever her name was, Hurricane Kathy or something to that effect, like this classic like party girl, and the stuff she does on Cinco de Mayo and stuff. But you just mentioned the gun violence one. They also did that one that's very serious that they always bring out when there's a mass shooting, which unfortunately seems to happen. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, this is unavoidable, says only country where this regularly happens, or whatever yeah.
Exactly. Did you get the impression on you, and you didn't work always, fully with them, but did you get the impression that like, were you surprised that they come up with something serious like that? That was always kind of a joke, or that was something that you like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think they're very. I mean, that's what they do. They're great at observations. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, that's totally in their wheelhouse and their voice to me. I mean, I remember like their 9/11 issue was the
Mm,
first attempt at comedy I saw by anyone. They before SNL, everyone talks about SNL coming back or like late night coming back, but The Onion was the first thing I remember seeing
oh wow.
after 9/11, and it
Hmm.
was, talk about a tightrope, but it was great. I remember there was the one that I remember was like, woman makes like American flag cake for barbecue just because she didn't know what else to do. Like
Mm,
a lot of stuff to sift through, and
exactly.
to find any way to comment on anything at that point is tough. Yeah,
Right.
I'm saying there. It's like that was 20 years ago. It's an entirely different staff at this point, but like
Sure.
you wouldn't know it. Like they've
Yeah.
maintained the same excellence.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that reminds me of David Foster Wallace has a famous essay that he did about the day of 9/11, the day after, and like you said, like what do we do now? And well, I'm going to make an American flag cake, and yeah, there's a laugh, but there's also like a oh wow, right?
Yeah, and I mean to hit on like that kind of behavior that we could all recognize as like, oh yeah, we know someone who did that,
Mm-hmm.
or it's the type
Mm-hmm.
of thing we can imagine doing. Like
Totally.
to hit on that like on September 25th or something is pretty amazing.
Yes.
Like to figure into the human
Mm-hmm.
condition, or yeah, it's
Right.
great. It's great.
I don't have a good transition from human condition too, but you've written at least two books, three books, maybe
I
four books.
have many books, more than other Croatos I could name.
Hey.
One book.
So what kind of writing do you do? Have you?
They've been all kids books. I wrote two kids books with Mad that were like, so Mad was part of DC Comics.
Mm,
So we had done a couple of kids books that were parodies of kids books, but about DC superheroes. So we
okay.
did, instead of Goodnight Moon, we did Goodnight Batcave, about like Batman wrapping things up for the night.
Uh,
And the other one was Superman and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, just about Superman
uh,
having
yeah.
a shitty day. And then we did another one I didn't write that was Don't Let the Penguin Drive the Batmobile, off of Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus.
Oh, okay.
And that one, my friend Jacob Lambert wrote that
Nice.
one. So I did those first two, and then they haven't come out yet, but I wrote a couple of little golden books
Cool.
that are actually about, well, one's a Marvel superhero and one's a Batman, a Batman one. So those are mine.
Nice. So
My
you're
stable.
yeah. So you're a trader then? You're doing DC now?
I mean, I'm a whore. I don't know them anything.
You don't discriminate exactly. You don't know. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. What did it feel like to get published in the New Yorker?
Oh, that was great. That was very cool. I was on their site. I wasn't in print. I should
Hey,
clarify.
that's all
I,
right.
I count it, but I just,
You should.
I don't want to steal any glory.
So that
Yeah,
was
that was.
about the I'm sorry, I cut you off, but it's about the Space Marines, right? Tell us about that one.
Yeah, it was a daily shout. So they do Shouts and Murmurs, does like a daily web thing also. So I It's called Space Marines Lock and Load, and it was just like a drill sergeant prepping his platoon of Space Marines before they face like some alien menace. So it's basically like Aliens, you know, like they're going to face something, and he's just kind of briefing them on what they should expect and how to prepare for it.
Was that like in
And
direct response to like Trump like ramping up on the Space Force?
no, I mean it might have made me think of it, but it wasn't.
Uh-huh.
You know, and more than one person was like, "Oh, it's about like Trump, right?" And I was like,
Right.
"Nope, not. It's just stupid, stupid
Uh-huh.
and stuff." So yeah, I was right when Trump was starting to talk about like Space Force and all that. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a goofy, yeah, goofy
So who
trope.
knows, in 5, 10, 15 years, that could literally be like an instruction manual,
Oh man,
right?
our booming space military. I hope that they, I hope they thrive.
So for
Yeah, I
again,
mean,
those watching
yeah,
on
use
YouTube, there it is.
a Starship Troopers image. So
Oh yes.
yeah,
Well, there should have been more mustaches then, right? Ah,
for
for Starship Troopers, wasn't that the one where they had the great mustaches? Or am I mixing it up with? I'm mixing it up with the cop one. I'll remember the name in a minute. That was embarrassing. That's not Spaceship Troopers. I'm sorry.
that's
So there it is from 2018, Space Marines Lock and Load, The New Yorker. That's your name, Dave
that's it.
Croatto.
Yeah.
That's you.
Proof. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Americans don't seem to always have the most healthy diets, huh?
No.
So this is a real menu, or this is a menu that you came up
That's
with? What was this one for?
that was for Mad. That was a TGI Fridays menu parody. Just disgusting. And we did all the props and stuff we did in the office.
Nice.
So yeah, I got to witness that. These monstrosities in person.
Some
Really
great
disgusting.
names. The Pizza Supreme salad, Salado Italiano, the Bacon Burger Garden Salad, the Fried Days Ample Sample, the Explosion with onion. You had one that was called Death by Chocolate, little asterisk, and it says something like, something like you will die if you have diabetes or something like that. Okay. And yeah, I don't think there's probably too much difference between this menu and some real ones though, right?
Yeah, I mean it's weird with Mad. There's like there would be stuff where it's like, oh my god, like we joked about this thing and then it happened, like, and I feel
Yes.
like there might have been something in that menu. I don't remember, but it's not far off from like where things are going. Where I mean, where you see like a fast food, like a ballpark or a fast food place where like
Mm-hmm.
they've used some item where it's like, a burger served on two donuts like inside a bundt cake, and just like, oh my god, we've made fun of this. Like we've lapped ourselves. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty gross.
Oh man. Yeah. So this last one, the last sample of yours is from the Bystander. The Art of the
Yeah,
Bystander. Is this an online magazine? Is this a
American Bystander.
American
It's
Bystander? Excuse
it's
me.
print and they do online also. Yeah.
So a great one to wrap up, where you started talking about, you're loving comic books and Batman and Superman and all that. Like, this is kind of like the classic, and correct me if I'm wrong, where like, Joker's toying with Batman, or he's not toying with. He's finally got him. He's got him wrapped up. Batman can't go anywhere. He
Yeah.
lost his utility belt. He has nowhere to go, but the Joker keeps talking instead of taking care of him. And
Yeah.
then Batman figures out some way, right? What was so dot 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 we meet again all about?
I'd like that dynamic. I mean, same as like the Space Marines. Like I think with Space Marines actually it started because I was thinking about like Tommy Lee Jones and The Fugitive when he's telling them like,
Uh,
like we're gonna check every farmhouse. I just like that. I like tropes like that, and this was another one where it was just like like Moriarty, and I like the idea of like an ongoing feud or like these rivals like locked in this epic battle, and just one person being incompetent and getting
mhm,
his ass handed to him again and again is
right.
yeah, that's just a kind of low hanging fruit for me. It's
So obviously
fun.
comedy, like everything else in pop culture, is evolving. Who are some giants of the game in 2021?
Oh man, I mean, myself aside, is
Obviously, that's
so far
a,
below everything else.
a given.
Um, I don't know. I mean, like in terms of like stand up, like John Mulaney is amazing, and
Hmm.
has been amazing for a long time. Yeah, I'm trying to think like uh, yeah, I mean I should have a ready answer, but like in terms of
Right.
stand up, I mean I like John Mulaney. Uh I think Jesus and Mero are doing
Mm,
great late night stuff that is different and not, not the Daily Show and not like
sure.
that kind of thing. Um, I don't know, man. I watch a lot of kid shows, and I watch a lot, and that's very interesting to me.
Hmm.
Uh, like I just watched Gravity Falls, and that
Okay.
made me laugh really hard and was very sweet. And I like movies are tough. Like I feel like
Hmm.
comedy movies, it's you get to a certain age where like you've seen a lot of things
Sure.
and only so many, there's only so many notes to play.
Hmm.
But I mean, very TV is still renewable and very nice. Like I love Bob's Burgers. I'm trying to think like what's new. Like I like stuff that's like I've never seen that before
Yeah.
and I've never seen that voice before. So like something like Drunk History, which is like canceled now, but like it's such a simple premise, but it's so hard to pull off well,
Right.
like that's, and it's so refillable where it's like, okay, it's not like this is going to be like, wow, they just really beefed it on this episode. It's like, it's
Hmm.
always kind of like the same level of clever and great.
Yeah.
And that makes me laugh a lot. And yeah, I'm trying to think other than that, like, I think that's part of it is like, you're always kind of chasing it, right? It's like,
Mm,
it's like with music, like where you keep going to shows and you keep like trying to find a band that you hadn't heard of before, like a B-side that like
mm,
you didn't know about from a band you did like. And that's kind of how it is with comedy, I think, is like you're always, I mean, everyone wants to keep laughing always. And I think
hmm.
part of the blessing and the curse of like loving comedy and being into comedy is that like you get kind of immune to it. Like
Sure.
you've seen a lot, like you kind of know the tricks. So when it's like, oh, this guy is just ripping off this guy, or this is fine, but it's kind of like that.
Mm,
So when you see something that's new or that's different, it's like it really, really blows you away.
hmm.
So it's kind of rarer and rarer and rarer. I hate to say, but
I hear you. I've drunk history, like talk about like an alchemy, like you said, it was so simple. Like I couldn't explain to you why that was so funny, but it just was.
it's pretty brilliant. I mean, like because the reenactments are also just like so much of it too, and that's so hard.
I think you're
It's like,
right.
yeah, we're gonna have really good actors lip sync. Like,
Hmm.
I wouldn't even think to try. Even if I had that idea, I'd be like, well, that's not doable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just great, great.
Oh man.
Uh,
Um, kind of, I guess, kind of mixing two of my questions together. I'm wondering about, the balance between writing for art, like that's objectively artistic or funny, versus like, you also got to make a living. And then I also kind of wonder about, any of your future projects. I know you're maybe kind of de-emphasizing work at this time, but what kind of things you're looking to get into, and how you find the balance between like people are going to want to buy that book or whatever is going to have to be sold, but also I want to make good quality content.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of it. My boss used to say that like the last thing the shoemaker wants to do when he gets home is make more shoes. So
Hmm.
it is kind of like, yeah, you do stuff you need to do, and you do stuff that I've been doing a lot of packets for late night, like trying to break into TV, and it's draining, and it's
Hmm.
like it's kind of both because like you want to do the best, most creative, funniest thing possible, but it's also like it needs to be in this way about
Sure.
this thing by this time. But that's a big part of it also is that like if you're doing it professionally, like you're not going to be making art all the time.
Hmm.
Like you'll want to make stuff you're proud of, but at the same time, if you're working on like on SNL, or if you're working at Mad or whatever, whenever you're working professionally, it's like you gotta go in with the army you have. Like,
You have a boss, right? You have a boss or bosses.
yeah. And no one's working in a vacuum. No one's like blue skying this stuff. So I think, you could do stuff like you could submit stuff to the New Yorker, or you can write essays or whatever. But like a lot of times it's just like, well, you need to, we want a sketch about, Elon Musk. So like
Mm-hmm.
a sketch about Elon Musk, uh, I remember talking to, I never really did much stand up, but a friend of mine was doing stand up, and I think he was doing like a college tour or a college performance with 3 other comics, and the crowd was just, like brutal, just like rowdy and young and drunk. And he was a very good comic and like managed to do a set, but he was saying the other comics were complaining that like they couldn't get through. I'll never forget. He was like, "Oh, you were making art tonight? You were going to make art? No, man, you gotta like roll with the punches and win this crowd over and try
Sure.
to tell some jokes." And I think that's true of any writing,
Yeah.
like, as much as, like my brother wrote this like amazing book, but like, I mean, it was a lot of work, but also like, he'll takes jobs, like he does real writing work.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, it's not always going to be like a profile of someone you love. Sometimes you're like,
Sure.
you're ghostwriting in a biography for an autobiography or memoir for someone, because like, all right, this is what they want, and like I've
Mm-hmm.
got this skill set and I can use it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question, but like,
No, it does.
yeah, there's always a bit of both. And even the stuff, like whatever my passion projects are, like someone still has to buy that shit, like
Mm.
I think that's kind of the danger of like self-publishing or all that stuff, is like someone's got to buy this, otherwise you're just doing a vanity project.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, lately my projects have been like, I've been working on making toys, like kind of joke parody-ish toys with a couple of mad artists. And like we did a Donald Trump He-Man figure where shirtless and in the loincloth, but like it's his physique. And um but even that is like, yeah, man, this is beautiful and this is great, but like we need to make money doing this, otherwise
Yeah.
we're just, you can lose money making art.
Mm-hmm.
If the goal is to make a living at this, like your art still has to at least not lose money.
Sure.
So there's always that.
So what I got from that is basically become like a famous act, like become like Ethan Hawke or James Franco, one of those guys who very good actors, very good, and then you can just do your vanity projects.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
key.
like even George Clooney is like making commercials in Japan
Yeah.
for $2 million. You gotta. None of us, if you have a trust fund or something, maybe,
Sure.
but like, it doesn't mean you have
Sure.
to make garbage, but like anything you make, anything you write, you still want someone to read it. You still want someone
Mhm.
to purchase it. You want some money to change hands, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
of course.
even this podcast, if this podcast was costing you $1,000 a week, you know what I mean? Like you kind of have to stop doing it probably.
Yep.
Like if you're not trying to make money, you should at least be trying to not lose money on whatever your creative
That's
endeavor.
deep. I like that. I like
I
that.
mean, that's just kind of what it is, right? I mean, you can't go out of business following what you love, because then you're just like a junkie. You're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
you're just throwing money away. So yeah, don't follow your dreams, kids. No, I think that's legitimately like advice worth following, is that
Sure.
like you can throw as much money as you want at an idea, and like they'll never reach a point where people will stop taking your money. You know what I mean? Like you can
Mhm.
always spend more money on stuff. So it's good to figure out like, okay, well, you know, I have an idea for a book, or I have an idea for an article, I have an idea for whatever. If you're going to be spending $10,000, like on researching it and plane ticket, and like it's not the right time. You need to figure out how to offset that.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you
Same.
so much.
On
Hearing
that
about
note,
no, but all, all jokes aside, like I appreciate kind of getting behind the curtain a little bit, hearing what it's like to write for, I mean, The Onion and the New Yorker and Mad Magazine. I mean, these are iconic publications, and it's just so cool to hear like some of the nuts and bolts of doing that. And obviously you're funny, and that helps, but you also have to do the work, and it's cool to hear some of the ins and outs of that. Like I, for example, would have thought of The Onion as like we're in one office, but you're like, no,
right.
I'm a contributor. I'm sending it in, just like so many other
Yeah.
people are.
Yeah, and with Mad too, it's like people would come in and expect to see like all the artists sitting at a drafting table,
Hmm.
and it's just there's some of that, but it's mostly not. Yeah,
Right. The quote unquote writer's table doesn't necessarily exist, or at least it's a big, pretty dang big table.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
All right.
It's true. Yeah,
Thank you so much, and I wish you continued great luck with your work. Thanks for
thanks. Dude.
sharing some of the ins and outs. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for talking. This was great.
This was great.
All
This
right.
was Lucky episode number 61. Thank you to Dave Croatto. If you've enjoyed the Chills of Will podcast, pause your podcast player right now. Go to Apple Podcasts. Please leave me a nice review and subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. You can also ask for the podcast by name using Alexa. Find it on Spotify, Stitcher, and on Amazon Music. The Chills of Will podcast YouTube channel will have this episode and other episodes. Please subscribe to the channel. You can follow me on Instagram where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down instrumental version, and the other song played on the episode is Hoops, instrumental by Matt Weidauer. Both great songs are used through archesaudio.com. For now, thanks for listening, and I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts by writers with, and this is a double entendre, writers with mad skills
No.
like Dave Croatto, whose work gives you chills at will.